Anthony, obviously, I think most people know, but for anyone who does not, there is no love lost between you and the current sheriff of Lincoln County.
No, sir.
Will
Not
you
much.
care to elaborate, give us a little background information and so forth?
My only real issue with the sheriff comes from the lack of lawlessness, or I should say the lawlessness in general. I take an oath of office and law enforcement itself very seriously. So anybody who deviates from their mission statement, anybody who is not what they claim to be, is a problem. They're a danger. You wouldn't want somebody slapping brakes in your car that find out that they're not really brakes, they're banana peels. It's a danger to you. With Sheriff Carpenter, my issues specifically go back to his systematic mishandling of evidence from like an earlier case of mine that was a life or death situation for me. And when just keeping a hold of the evidence that was collected is beyond their ability or their will to do so, whether it's incompetence or corruption, either way it's a problem. So my issue initially was not with Carpenter individually. It still isn't with him as a person. It's not personal for me. It's actually just a matter of principles. But I actually voted for the guy in 2010. I thought we'd be getting a better sheriff. But for me, seeing how things get intentionally mishandled and that there's zero accountability. I mean, everybody messes up. Like, during my time, in any job you've ever had, I'm sure everybody's had a day where you just completely had a no-brainer and you typed in the wrong number or you did the wrong thing, and that's human. But when somebody points it out and your response is, go away, your response is, hit the brakes or it'll get worse. At that point, that's no longer a mistake of the head, it's a mistake of the heart. And that's where I think a matter of character and questioning that character comes into play. And I've been questioning his character for a while, and he's been giving me plenty of reasons to do so. I mean, from the day I was exonerated and asked for my evidence of property back, and I got like that much back when they had taken that much, and there's no excuses, no explanations, to stalking, to attacks, to everything else. It just acts that if I did it or if you did it, it would be a crime. When that happens and the person doing it is wearing a badge, it is time for a change.
I said before we started that I was going to address the elephant in the room
Yes, sir.
at the beginning, and you've told much of it, and you briefly mentioned there. You did go to prison.
Oh, yes.
You spent, I think, a little over 2 years there,
Yeah, 886 days, not that I was counting.
and you were then exonerated.
Correct, sir. Yes, sir.
So we've clarified that point. Let's
Oh, yes.
move on to other
Yes,
things
sir.
now.
Yes, sir. And the evidence that was missing before and during and after the trial, that's what the sole purpose of law enforcement is. It's to find facts, collect them, and preserve them. They don't judge or influence a case by playing God with the evidence or the witnesses or anything else. You just do your job. And if you can't do your job, then somebody needs to do it for you. And that's where I'm more than happy to volunteer. So I would like to clarify one thing. Some people will label this as a grudge. There's a big difference. This is philosophical, I guess, but there's a big difference between justice and revenge. If somebody kills your dog or steals your car, if you want them prosecuted or punished, that's not revenge. That would be justice, correct? That's all I'm asking for.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about your background and qualifications,
Sure.
because obviously that's not the whole Anthony Huss
Oh
story.
gosh, no. that and the whole stuff with that just gave me actually a greater insight into our legal system, inside, outside, inside definitely, all the way down the rabbit hole. I got to see how it works and how it does not work at every level. But I will say it's the best legal system in the world. Otherwise, I wouldn't be trying to be part of it again. It just isn't perfect. And that's just a matter of people and training and culture. And that's where I can fix it. My qualifications, let's see. As far as law enforcement specifically goes, initially when I joined the military right out of high school, I graduated West Lincoln in '93. I joined the military, joined the Navy, and I got stationed overseas. Luckily, I was given a great honor. I was invited to join our base police there, our military police officers, and help bolster the security force that we had there. This was not a military, we are military, but this was not for us to fight against enemy combatants per se. This was much more along the lines of an actual town police or a sheriff's office. Type of, we arrested people, civilians, military. We had a lot of international flux, as you can imagine. This was over in Japan, so we had multiple jurisdictions. It was a jurisdictional nightmare sometimes, because we would have consecutive jurisdiction with American law, with military law, with Japanese law, and it was a lot to learn, and it was great though. But here's the thing: during my years wearing the badge initially, and this was as a government official, same as some of our other guys would be, I learned that it wasn't about who you are or who you know, which seems to be a lot of what people decide in a town where everybody's lived there for a long time. We were always focused on the principles, and not just because we're in the military, but because we didn't have a chance to use our position one way or the other to benefit ourselves. There was no police discounts on base. There was no, I know so-and-so, they can get me off of a ticket. It was very efficient. It was very professional. It was military. You work with the military as well too, Wayne, so you know there's certain standards that you just don't mess with. That was one of them. I was there for several years. Started off as, did road work, of course, everybody does. But the biggest thing I learned from the very beginning was to do evidence-based investigations, 100%. Because none of us know everything. None of us are God. So for us to pretend that we do, it would be to play God. Just logic, right? So we were always taught to pursue the evidence and be like a scientist, is what one of my training officers told me. And I thought, well, I'm not in the nuclear engineering program anymore. I don't think I need to be a scientist anymore. And he said, no, they follow it 100% on the merit of the evidence. They don't go by guts. They might investigate a gut feeling, but they don't let it decide the flow of the case. And yeah, after that, basic crime scene preservation, evidence collection, stowage, and keeping it safe. That's what law enforcement is supposed to be there for. We don't try cases, and we definitely don't want to fluff our numbers. And this happens. It's human nature to want to have a really good profile, really good, I guess you could say, work history. But we don't want to fluff numbers in order to get more promotions or whatever. We want to make sure that our focus is on the liberty and the freedom of Americans. We all take an oath to the Constitution. Now, being military, I know definitely what that means. I was never relieved of my oath of office to protect this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I take that very seriously every day in everything I do in relations to the sheriff's race. I think some people, it's a ceremonial thing. They do it, but then they forget and they go to do what they want. That's not the way it should be. Now, my experience there in the military, I was there, military force there for many years, and by the time I processed out, my enlistment came into an end, and I was going to get I got an honorable discharge, so I have an honorable discharge, but at that point, you've got to have a job of some sort, right? We all got to make it in this world. So I had already started building my own private security firm as well, and that's when I employed a lot of the military training, military bearing, our decorum, our core values, if you would. Well, Navy is honor, courage, commitment, and I apply those directly. It's what I knew, and it works. So I built a model all based upon that. However, it was for civilian usage. It was for private contracts. So we would be hired by neighborhoods or by restaurants or by banks, whoever else that wanted us to patrol. Same as you would see, honestly, same as a police department. They're a small private township agency. Or in this area, you might look at us being more like Griffith Security, because we definitely had the ability to interact with people and keep their property safe and them safe. The interesting thing about that is I built it up And it got built up pretty fast. We had over 150 people by the time I left, and I came back to the U.S. to be here stateside and open up my own business chain. But when I left, we had 150 and some odd people there. We had seen how customers need certain things, and the only way to do that is by listening to them. That is a big thing that we can do here in our local community. I think a lot of times law enforcement tells us what they're going to do. They don't ask us what we want them to do. And that's great because they know better than us on some situations. But the general course of a government should not be to do as it wishes. It should be to do as the people wish. And that's where I think that my history with the customer service aspect of having a private organization can play a major role, not just as a way to improve our quality of service, but also to get to the core philosophy of what does an officer do. Building in from that, we had to do budget-wise. We had a budget to work with, of course. We got paid to do our jobs. We did it very well, but we weren't a government agency, so we wouldn't get paid if we didn't do our job right. We would get fired. We would lose a contract. There was a degree of accountability. If we messed up, there was people I had to fire. And that is something that I think we're also lacking in law enforcement, in government law enforcement, is accountability. Why did this guy do that? Why was he drunk on duty? Why? There's 100 examples I can give, but they don't happen. Very seldom do you ever see an officer be held accountable, and that's wrong, because we're supposed to be holding ourselves accountable to the same standards, the exact same standards that we'd be holding you accountable to. No better, by far. Because if we're above the law, then there is no law. But the accountability is a key component that is missing, and you'll hear a lot of that in my campaign platform. People think it's silly. Why don't you focus on something else? Okay, fair question. How are you looking around here at the YMCA? I see people getting ready to shut down in the next hour or so here. They're going to be cleaning the place up, sweeping it down, right? Would you shrug your head or shrug your shoulders and shake your head at somebody who mopped the floor with a dirty mop? It would be ridiculous, right? We can't clean up the county unless we are setting an example, a clean, above-board example, one that is worthy of the respect of our citizens, not one where we just simply demand the respect and do as we will. Carrying on with traits that carry over from my private practice into government law enforcement. We had training. Our training was keyed in to the services that we wish to provide. Customers would ask for a service, we provide that service. Now I see that a lot of law enforcement, they've got all kinds of cool training. They've got training that they've designed for themselves. But they've forgotten that a lot of people don't necessarily want them to go in a certain direction. They'd be saying, well, let's go ahead and focus on the opiate war. Opiate war, war on drugs, whatever you want to call it. But the war on opiates specifically is something that I don't think law enforcement is really geared to handle. We are geared, of course, to go out and with SWAT teams to do drug busts. Sure. We can pull people over and have K9 search the cars. We have 100 ways of busting them for drugs. And that's great, but that's only half of the solution. The other half is, how do we prevent it from happening again? And I think a lot of people, they see drugs in their community and they just say, lock them up and throw away the key. It's a cool, I don't want to say John Wayne, I love John Wayne, but it's a very simple, overly simplified solution to a very complicated problem. Lock them up, throw away the key. Well, eventually they're going to get out. When they get out, the person who got busted with, the guy got busted with like a joint, or he had a little bag of cocaine or whatever, he got busted with it. But at the time, he had a job, he had a car, he had a house, he had a family. You send the person to prison for a couple of years, and I can definitely relate to this part. When you get out, everything you had before is gone. So if that guy was using drugs before because of stress or whatever, or self-medicating, then you can bet your life he's going to want to go right back to it. So we've actually created a bigger long-term problem for ourselves. And then we'll be saying the same thing the next time he gets arrested. And recidivism rates prove this. They come out of prison, they're not rehabilitated. People who actually committed a crime, not myself, but people who actually committed a crime don't really clean themselves up. They just can't do it while they're in prison. When they get out, they go do it again. So how do we fix that? Because it's a cycle, right? It's almost like you're running on the court square. You're just going around in circles and circles and circles. We've got to have an off-ramp. If we have that off-ramp available, then we can slowly start to peel off people that we can salvage. We can help them by giving them a chance to get clean. If you get busted, throw you in jail, you didn't get clean. The drugs were taken away from you, but they never addressed the key problems. Myself, I've been injured. Wayne, I'm sure you know how it feels like to be kind of hurt sometimes. Doctors will medicate you. Problem here in the U.S., they medicate you a lot. During my time as a professional cage fighter, I saw a lot of good men who were fighters get hurt, and then they legitimate injury, snap shin or whatever. But they get medicated, and then pretty soon they try to go back on their feet, and then they get hurt again, and the medication becomes a temporary thing, then it becomes a permanent thing, then the medication gets taken away, so then they self-medicate because now they've developed an addiction. It doesn't happen to bad people only. It happens to a lot of good people, mothers and fathers and kids. But those people, they don't want to be in that situation, but they don't have a path to get off of it. So the biggest problem, and this is why I'm talking about it so much, is the drug war right now, opiate war, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes it's called war on drugs. I call it the war on common sense, because you can't lock up your problems. They're going to come back. In the meantime, locking them up costs us a fortune. The war on drugs has cost us trillions of dollars. Right now, the war on drugs, it is making your grandkids who aren't even born yet, they're being born into debt because of this. So why don't we maybe try something that hasn't failed? We can use a very clear platform, very clear path to creating this program that has been done in other countries. It's just not done in America. But we're Americans. We're supposed to be better than this. We're supposed to be the guys who lead the way, lead by example. Apparently, we're not doing a very good job in this category. But we can look at other countries overseas, Norway, Finland. They have taken people who, hey, you got a bag of drugs. Great, let's bust you. We're going to destroy the drugs for sure. So up until that point, it looks the exact same as any other drug arrest. But then once that's done, give them a chance to go to rehab. Now, here, we're going to actually have them be accountable for their actions. I'm not going to say, you're busted, go to rehab, and leave it at that. We're going to be keeping tabs on them. We're going to be checking on them. We're going to be testing them. We want to make sure that they're actually making a go of it. Now, if they don't want to go to rehab, okay, then you will see the dominoes fall as they always do. Then you go to jail, go to prison, and so on and so forth. But people who value their life, that's a very key phrase. People who value their life will want to try this. They'll value it so they can recover some portion of their self-control, their dignity, so they can keep some kind of connection with their family and their community. They'll do this for that reason. Or because they're just sick and tired of it, but they didn't have a chance to get off of it because it's too hard or the facilities aren't there. Now, this is the chance they need. And at least we're trying something different. And the philosophy here is not just, this is not me being soft on drugs at all, because this is actually quite hard on drugs. This is the way that we gut out the entire infrastructure of the drug dealing business. We take away their clients. How do we do that? We've got all these clients over here. They all want something. We take away the demand that these clients have for a product, and they won't have it anymore. The drug dealers might have it on hand as stock, like a business, but they won't have anybody to sell it to. So people say kick the drugs out of the community. That sounds cool. That's not correct though. You've got to kick the demand out of the community. Once there's no demand, or once the demand is decreased, then the drugs will decrease. I've never been one for drugs personally, but if they outlawed bacon, I'm sure I would be the biggest bacon addict and the biggest bacon smuggler in the county. If you make anything illegal, there is going to be a demand still for it. Prohibition taught us this. We can see that whole pattern falling out right now. Something is made illegal, whether it's marijuana or cocaine or whatever, and then the government says, well, now we'll make it legal. We'll regulate it as long as we get a cut. So it wasn't really the actual items or the substance that people were abusing or the damage it was doing to them that the government cared about. It was more about regulation and control. That's my opinion. Like I said, greatest government in the world, not a perfect government though. So why don't we go ahead and use some common sense and some business savvy and gut the whole process of shipping drugs into our community and distributing them. Crazy ideas here. Of course, people are like, no, that's too soft on drugs. That won't work. Really? Think of one product, carbon paper. Right? Now, myself, we're old enough to remember how carbon paper works. There was a day when if you didn't have carbon paper, you're just typing one letter at a time. And that was our best way of copying things. Nowadays, I'm gonna take a wild guess and bet that, I know there's carbon paper still out there, but I bet the demand for it is almost that big. Because we can take a phone and take a picture of a document and have a high resolution image. So the demand for that item is gone. We can have a photocopy, we can do whatever. So an item, when it's no longer desired, the demand for it goes away, then the item almost completely disappears. I'm sure I could go find a stack of carbon paper, just like you'll find a joint or a little baggie of cocaine somewhere. But if we can focus on this as a plan of action, give it an option, and bring down the amount of drugs in our community, this is a long-term solution. We've seen it work. We've seen it doesn't work in the U.S. because nobody tries it. I'm going to diverge it for a moment here and go a little bit deeper into the problem. We have a prison for profit issue in our country. That's not how it's supposed to be. I was always taught, after reading the Constitution, after studying, after gaining deeper appreciation for our founding fathers and the values and principles that made our country what it is, what it was, what it could be again. The role of government was specifically and limited to protecting the individual rights of American citizens. It wasn't for creating a huge profit paradigm, or a huge profit scheme. It was designed so that Americans can know that they're going to be safe in their persons, their papers, their property, and that they're going to have some degree of the fruits of their labor. Now, the whole prison for profit thing has gotten to the point where states have signed contracts with prisons so that they have to meet a certain minimum amount of occupancy. It's like a hotel. You can't go below 80. But that's not how businesses work. But when you get involved with a government agency, that's how they're making it work. Because these people now have leverage over our own legislators, over our own counties, the state, to say, hey, where's our numbers? You've got to get more people convicted. But isn't that kind of contradictory to what we're supposed to be doing? If people aren't committing crimes, then you're not supposed to be arresting them. So you shouldn't suddenly lower the bar so you can get more people arrested just to satisfy a contract with a third-party prison. So those people won't like me. The traditional people who like just to lock them all up and throw away the key mentality, those are always the very short-minded, short-sighted as well too, people that do not like this idea. But those who want to actually make our community better, don't write these people off. They were your neighbors, your family, your high school classmates at one point in time. Don't write them off, because that only attests to what kind of person you are, not what kind of person they are. So we're going to give these people a chance, and that's all that anybody can ask is a fair chance to get off drugs. And in the meantime, we can save a boatload of money. Think about it. If the arrest rate just drops down by 10%, based on people who are trying to go in the course of drug rehab, we can reduce the population in our jails. Suddenly, the whole overcrowding issue we've all been hearing about, and it is overcrowded. You have 4 guys in a 2-man cell. There's lawsuits waiting to happen. humanity issues. But we can reduce that. So we can suddenly, get our arrest numbers drop because we're doing a better job, not just doing more numbers. So we're looking at the quality of work, not the quantity. Then our jails, the overcrowding issue goes down. Suddenly, this talk of building a brand new jail, we don't need that. We're going to have some empty cots. So now we're already saving taxpayer money, plus the money it takes to house the inmates. Plus, then we have the amount of money it takes to send them through the court system. See, I told you, going down the rabbit hole gives you a certain perspective on every stage of the process, in a way that nobody else can really appreciate. But our court dockets, they're bogged down. Our DAs will basically sit back and wait on a case for years, and then just try to settle out with a plea deal. It might be a solid case, but they don't want to try it because just wait long enough and they'll settle. In the meantime, though, that person, whether innocent or guilty, they're losing their personal income, so we're losing tax dollars, we're losing tax revenue. Then also we have the fact that we're costing the taxpayers money by either housing them or prosecuting them. And then we have the court docket itself is so bogged down that DAs will always say we don't have enough people, we don't have enough to actually try the real hard cases. We can free their hands up a little bit, decrease that caseload. Just the number, like a simple 10% the first few months would shunt enough of the people that we are arresting that are suspects over into a different direction that they wouldn't even enter into the system. And suddenly, we're going to have a sudden drop in all the costs from the jail, from staffing, from the cost to house a prisoner, to the cost to prosecute one. And in case you hadn't figured out, once you prosecute somebody and convict them lawfully in a constitutionally fair court, I'm going to say that, once that happens, they go to jail, they go to prison. Now you have a long-term issue. The cost doesn't go away, even though we're sending them to a state-level facility. Well, now we're going to have an increase in the burden on our tax dollars on a state level. So it doesn't ever go away. And people just think by pushing this thing way over there, you didn't do anything. You accomplished nothing. But you did cost yourself a bunch of money. And you did avoid the problems. And now it's worse. And that's why we see this whole thing, 3 or 4 decades, I'm so sorry, 3 or 4 decades into the drug war, where it really kicked into high gear, and we see ourselves with a bigger problem than we ever had before.
What is the,
Sorry.
what would you say is the,
A lot of issues there.
that's fine.
Yeah.
What would you say is the primary reason why you should be elected sheriff rather than one of the other candidates?
I'm the only one who's not an entrenched individual. The other law enforcement officers, many of them, they've already been, for instance, they'll tell you that they've been the narcotics officer at such and such agency. That's great. That means that we're doing the exact same thing I was just talking about us not doing. That means you fought the drug war in the way that it should not have been fought. And you didn't have enough gumption or enough vision to change the course. A lot of these guys, the other night, I heard them say, oh, we're going to start, they started talking about rehab since I started mentioning it. But these guys were in a position of power, and still are, many of them, but I don't see any of them trying to affect this change. If you're already in there, in that position of power to make a difference, but you didn't do it, then why should we give you more power? You're going to do what you always have done. Myself, I'm going to do what I've always done, which is find the best solution that actually tackles the problem. It's not going to be a cosmetic fix. It always looks cool to see these big drug busts where we do a big roundup and everybody gets locked up. It gives people in the community a sense of, hey, that's my tax dollars at work. Hey, I feel safer now. But it's a false impression because most of those busts are low-level busts. They don't actually attack the suppliers, and they don't actually take away from the demand. All they do is flood the court docket, and we're back to square one, but it's even worse afterwards. So why am I different than everybody else? I guess was just your question. I'm the only one who is in it for the people. Now, I'll say that about all the current and former law enforcement individuals who are candidates, because I've seen them be part of the problem to the point where even some of them will rig cases and they'll botch up a simple sum. One guy, I'm sure we all know who he is, with Mr. Monday. I don't want to talk ill of anybody, but this is just a slap in the face situation. When you're an investigator and you have a CI go out to do a drug buy, and you don't bother to check the batteries in the recorder, you don't bother to check your cameras to make sure they're pointing. At the end, you slung some drugs out in the street or bought some drugs, and you don't even know who you did business with. How is that in any way, shape, or form okay? I mean, look at any other. This all ties back into my accountability thing. They're not accountable to their mission statement. They're not accountable to what they say they're doing. And I want to be different. I will be different. I'm the only one really who trumps that whole card about accountability, and you've seen me do it for years. I try to hold somebody's feet to the fire when they are committing a crime, if they're a public official, when they're not doing their job and they're breaking their oath of office. You've seen me do that. That's my pattern, and people think it's political, but it's not. It's principled. When it comes down to it, I'm the only one who's actually going to make the difference that we need. I'm the only one who's going to make the improvements to our system. Everybody else, they've been part of the problem. So, and I don't see a single one of them really wanting to make a change. Why would they? They've been doing this for 10, 20, 30 years. I don't think they know how to change.